All right, we're going to be delaying starting of the NFP meeting, which regularly starts at 4 p.m. Today, we're just waiting for one other board member to arrive to complete the quorum we need to continue and conduct business. So until then, we'll hang tight, and once they're here, we'll start.
right. I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the NFP Review Board for Tuesday, December 16th, 2025. Nolan, will you please call the roll?
Hollander. Frederickson. Rowe. Bergia.
Here.
Stemple.
Here.
Martin.
Here.
Bassett.
Here.
Can I get a motion to excuse absent members?
Yes, so moved. Support.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Item B, adoption of the agenda. Can I get a motion to adopt the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Support.
All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Item C, approval of minutes. Approval of the meeting minutes from the NFP Review Board meeting on November 25th, 2025. Are there any amendments or comments related to the draft meeting minutes from the November 25th meeting? All right, I'm hearing none. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes from the November 25th, 2025 NFP meeting as presented?
So moved. Support.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Item D, public comments. If there are any general public comments, please come forward, state your name, and you'll have 3 minutes to address the board.
All right, good afternoon. My name is Dante Hudson. I'm here representing United Pursuit Basketball Club. We service about 150 to 200 youth athletes from all over the county and beyond. United Pursuit, we definitely support any efforts for a youth sports facility, and we want to be clear on our commitment to being responsible stewards over the environment during this process. This facility is very necessary to promote health and wellness, inclusion, a stronger sense of community, and youth development in general for our kids. It goes without saying that more safe spaces for the youth in our community is very important, and while providing such a space, wooded areas, trees, and surrounding spaces won't go overlooked. As an organization, we trust those on the council for this project to be responsible in making something we can be proud of. As a Kalamazoo community member, I thank you for your time and attention to this community and the environment, and I can't wait to see how this project takes off and provides Kalamazoo youth new opportunities to stay active. Thank you.
Cool, thank you. Are there any more in-person public comments? All right, I'm seeing nobody step forward. Are there any online call-in comments? And there's about a 1 minute delay between what happens here in the live stream, so we'll give it a minute too for people to be able to call in. All right, sounds like no call-in comments so far. Moving on to item E, board member comments. Are any comments from the board? Hearing none. Moving on to item F, new business, 1617 North Drake Road, Westgate Sports Complex. Nolan, can you please provide some background on this?
Yeah, so I'll go through my staff report first, and then we'll invite the applicants up I did want to just pass this along to the board members that are here. This was submitted by the applicant. I believe they're letters of support for the project, so just some material submitted at the beginning of the meeting. Yeah, so this parcel is located at 1617 North Drake Road, and if you're not sure where that is, that's okay, because it's kind of a strange parcel within the city boundary. It is basically the northwest corner of the city. It's in the Westwood neighborhood, and it's basically undeveloped as it stands right now. It's basically a 62-acre flag-shaped wooded lot, and it's kind of on the boundary of Kalamazoo Township, Oshtemo Township, and then, it's within that weird part of Westwood neighborhood within the city that kind of stands on its own between township and the city. It's currently zoned RS5, and what the applicant is looking to do with this property is to split this larger 62-acre parcel into a 20-acre rectangular lot on the western sort of edge of it, and then develop the site into an amateur sports facility. Just due to the parcel's proximity to US 131, it's highly visible from that major roadway. So that makes it a very desirable location for this type of regional development. This project's being led by Discover Kalamazoo in partnership with multiple agencies, one of the agencies being the City of Kalamazoo as well, for disclosure. So with all that said, the project itself, overall in its scope, is a little bit complex, right? So the property has been undeveloped for a long time. I believe it was originally purchased with the intention of it being developed into a cemetery, which never happened. And I think it was primarily farmland in that area. And over time, it got left to its own devices and kind of developed into a woodland with a larger woodland complex. The applicant actually submitted their woodland delineation and files, so that's all detailed in your submission, in your packet. But what makes this complex is kind of the inter-jurisdictional nature. So multiple agencies partnering to help develop this project, and it also borders on the townships, like I mentioned. In particular, and you'll see it in the design sheets, the overall concept plan for the site. There's a sort of dashed line through the upper right-hand corner on the sheet, basically a portion of the woodland in that upper right corner of the site. That dashed line represents the potential, basically, for a future road, basically an extension of Maple Hill Drive, to cut up through there. And that's one of the reasons that this is somewhat complex. The Oshtemo Township Master Land Use Plan in its draft form has this area and to the north, H Avenue to Croydon, as sort of a special development area within their plan. And their plan calls out eventually trying to extend Maple Hill Drive up through that property to connect to a larger development complex to the north. So that's where staff worked a lot with the applicant to understand what the ask is for this meeting as it stands right now, but also making sure you all as a board have all this information at hand when this discussion occurs at this meeting, right? So as it stands right now, there's two variance requests that the applicant is looking to proceed with. And for the NFP board members and for anyone in the general public's reminder, how this would work, right? Normally, projects come to NFP as a part of the site plan development process, right? So project goes into site plan, comes to NFP for approval. However, if there's a project that's flagged, or in this case, we might understand that they're seeking a variance, I'll work with our zoning administrator and we'll work together with the applicant and their team to understand and gather as much information as we can and work with them on, what were they thinking about the project, have they explored other options before looking at seeking variances? And in this case, with the way the sports complex is designed, or how one of these sports complexes is typically designed, it doesn't leave a lot of wiggle room with the current natural features on site, which is why the applicant is hoping to preserve 13.5% of the existing woodlands on what that 20-acre rectangular lot would be. And that's when, due to the size of this site and the fact that it's 100% woodland right now, normally they would have to, preserve 25%. So they're looking for that deviation from 25 to 13.5%. The other natural feature that's very prominent on the property are some complexes of 20% or greater grade slopes. And those slopes are kind of located in the central area of kind of where the parking lot is proposed to be, particularly that sort of green space in the middle of the parking lot as it's shown on the conceptual is kind of where some of those slope complexes are located. There's no significant water resources attached to this site or wetlands that have been delineated, so this is primarily looking at woodland standard, the slope and slope setback standard, and then on the concept plan too, you'll notice a pretty large area for stormwater. As many of you know, serving on the board, there are more stringent stormwater requirements for NFP sites, so that's looking very preliminary at where potentially that would be stored and treated. So all that to say, this is a bit complex from that perspective. There's lots of these agencies working together. There's this future road that could potentially impact, right? They could come back in the future if the road doesn't, if the woodland preservation percentage were to stay at 13.5% as it's being requested, there's a potentiality that the applicant would have to, or the township would have to come back in the future and maybe request another variance to potentially put a road through that area if there's no other alternative, right? So that's where in the staff report you'll see kind of mapping out a couple of potentialities with this, right? The first one to consider for the board members to consider is that, the variance recommendation to the Zoning Board of Appeals be just what the applicant is requesting as of today, which is that 13.5%, and then the ability to impact the slopes that are protected and slope setbacks just within that project limit. The second thing to consider would be, getting a better understanding of what's the difference in that request for preservation if the road technically were going to go in with this project today. Is it 1% lower than that 13.5%? Is it 2%, right? And basically, for the board to consider is that their recommendation could be, we just consider that accounting for that preservation requirement being lower now instead of coming back to NFP in the future. The difference with that, though, is that, if they were to come back in the future looking for a variance, they would have more strict requirements to preserve the woodland that stays, right? The woodland preservation table in the NFP ordinance states that, basically the size of that parcel and what would be left after this project comes through, they would need to preserve 90% of what's left, right? So there's not that wiggle room that there is right now because it is such a large wooded lot. And it's unclear at this time if or when that road extension of, Maple Hill Drive would occur. So it could occur a year, 2 years, 3 years, 10 years, there isn't a clear timeline quite yet for that. And then the other potential option here is, basically the other option too is that the board could also make a non-recommendation to the Zoning Board of Appeals for the variances at hand, right? So all that to say, I want to put this out there clear for the board that in this case, you know, with my staff report, I'm making a recommendation, but you're also your own board. So, you know, you can change what the recommendation might be, or potentially there's a condition that you want to see attached. You can also, if you're needing more information, not that if you don't have enough information today and you would need more information, you could table this item to a future NFP meeting. So I wanted to make sure that it was clear what those options are. And for everybody here as well, or listening, and for the board, the other thing to remember is that this is basically a recommendation for the variances that are being requested from NFP. Those would go to Zoning Board of Appeals, and then the Zoning Board of Appeals is the final authority to either grant or deny the variance requests. So just making all that clear and upfront with everybody. So the other part of this too was because they're requesting these variances, there was public notice that was required. That was sent out on time. The project would come back through, so you would see it again in site plan review, because it would come through our site plan review process, which cannot start until this portion is figured out or moves forward. So with that, and I'll let the applicants come up in a moment, but in my staff report, my current recommendation is to proceed with what they're requesting right now, which is the recommendation to the Zoning Board of Appeals, granting a variance from the protected slopes and slope setbacks standards within the project limits, and then a recommendation to the Zoning Board of Appeals to grant a variance from the woodland standard to preserve 13.5% of the existing woodland when 25% is the minimum, usually based on the size of this parcel and how the percentage of it that's wooded or woodland. So I think with that, though, I will invite the applicants up to speak to their project and ensure that this is presenting correctly. And then
Very
just,
much.
yeah, you'll have to speak kind of close to the mic.
Okay, excellent, thank you. My name is Jane Ghosh. I'm the president and CEO of Discover Kalamazoo. Discover Kalamazoo is the Convention and Visitors Bureau for Kalamazoo County. And I am also here in my role as a board member of what is called the Kalamazoo County Event Center Assessment District, which I'll explain a little bit more about that in a minute. That's an authority that was established between Kalamazoo County and the city of Kalamazoo to manage the assessment revenue we're using to build the project. So if you could go to the next slide, please. So we've had, throughout the course of this project, we've had a lot of people come and make public comment. Over 30 of them, actually. You heard from Dante just a moment ago, because we've heard, the great need. And I wanted to share with you, we didn't ask the kids to come today, but just a couple minutes of video of public comment from county commission meetings.
And I just like being an athlete and having to travel just even 45 minutes or an hour away just to play a sport, or maybe even 2 games of volleyball, is just a lot when you're 12.
My name is Shauna Turner, AKA Bird. We are the co-founders of AB Workshop. A is for Ace, B is for Bird, and we are heavily involved in the community. I have my basketball coach right here from high school. So the same lessons that she's taught me, we pass it down to our kids and the community all around Kalamazoo County.
I feel like the sports facility would be very beneficial to our family, especially me, because we spend a lot of time going out of town when we could have one right here and still spend time with my family instead of having to leave, carpooling, and just losing quality time I could be with my family. So I feel like it'll be very beneficial for us and have us closer as a family and be more productive as athletes as well.
this gym in Kalamazoo, I feel like being a student athlete alone, this would most definitely help a lot of kids, you know, stay out of trouble and actually want to be in the gym, just because this gym is in our city alone, wanting us to like work more or like.
Hi, I'm Maria Potts, and I'm a United Pursuit player and athlete. I personally played travel AAU, which is not only expensive but also difficult with traveling all the time and trying to manage school and like other activities. There's a lot of opportunity to have tournaments closer to home if we have this facility, and it will help more of my friends and teammates participate. We fundraise a lot to pay for travel and fees to play. We have to go to far distances to play, when I feel like Kalamazoo is in a great location to build our own place to have tournaments. It will also bring out a lot more opportunities for teens to be supported in doing positive activities.
Awesome. If you could advance to the next slide, please.
Thank you, Ms.
Good afternoon. My name is Dante Hudson.
And
There we go. Thank you. So we learned very quickly that there's a lot of local demand for a facility like this. What we are proposing is that local youth there's a way for local youth to benefit from what we call the visitor economy as the Convention and Visitors Bureau. So we did a feasibility study and that validated this project. Monday through Thursday, local use will be prioritized for the facility, and that will increase participation opportunities for underserved youth. It will also create jobs. The economic benefits and the visitor economy side of this is we will have about almost 225,000 non-local attendee days, people coming in from outside the region to participate in tournaments that will be held on the weekends for an economic impact of almost $50 million. And it's that bottom bullet point there that will generate about 36,000 new hotel room nights within Kalamazoo County. And it's those hotel room nights that the hotels are very interested in. If you could go to the next slide, please. So for this to be a tournament facility and get those hotel room nights, it has to be successful for tournaments. And so we know what makes a successful regional sports tournament. We need adequate parking. We need sufficient ingress and egress. We need to have a minimum number of courts. So in order to win these regional tournaments, we need to have at least 8 basketball courts under one roof, which can then be used as 16 volleyball courts. I'll show you a diagram of that shortly. The courts have to be spaced appropriately in between, like the serving lanes for volleyball need to be taken into consideration. So in order to win those tournaments, we have to have the right design of the facility. The ceiling height needs to be correct, and there has to be spectator viewing and seating. So we go to the next slide. So this is the proposed facility layout. So it's 4 basketball courts along the top with 4 along the bottom, and then the beige lines are it serving as volleyball courts as well. So it could either be used as 8 basketball courts, 16 volleyball courts, any combination thereof. It could also host any other sport that can be played on a hard surface, for example, with mats on top, like wrestling or other kind of combat mat sports. And then to the side, you'll see indoor turf. When we did the study, we also learned there's a significant shortage of indoor turf in our community for local use. So the way that this project is being funded, if you could go to the next slide, please, is using what was called the Event Center Financing Act. So it is an incremental 4% assessment on hotel stays. So all the plan is for the county to bond for this. All of the debt service for that bond will be paid for by this assessment revenue. It only applies to hotels with at least 35 rooms. And the hotels and motel owners got to vote on this in a referendum that was run by the county. And overwhelmingly, 82% of them, they got 1 vote per room, 82% said yes, that we will raise, have an assessment on our hotel stays to raise money to build this facility that then really provides, so it's essentially free to local taxpayers because it's being paid by the out-of-towners who are staying in the hotels. So that assessment has already started being collected, and that's what will be used as the debt service. So about $45 million facility that will be paid for by visitors to our community. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kurt Ardema to talk to you more about the project.
Thank you, Jane. Good afternoon. My name is Kurt Ardema. I work for an organization called AVB. We do construction and development. I have background in planning and development, which is what brings me here to this project today. We also have Lori Davis from Hurley and Stewart here. Lori has worked on the civil engineering and a lot of the NFP drawings that you've seen in your packet today. So, and I want to say thank you for meeting. We appreciate the opportunity to be here today and be in front of this board for discussion of this community project. And I have on the screen here an image of the site. This is actually a photo from the site on the right with about a month ago before the snow fell, but also the new sports facility and conceptual rendering of what that might look like. Nolan, if you could go to the next slide, please. So I also have a map here. This map is an aerial view. It's oriented to the south and west, looking from the site at US 131. The site is highlighted in yellow. It gives a bit of a perspective of downtown in the distance. Those are actually the downtown buildings in the distance there. A little difficult to see on the screen. And the WMU, West Main Street running kind of in the middle of the screen. And 131 on the bottom, also showing Ashmo Township and its kind of the unique nature of this site that Nolan mentioned, how it really is wrapped by a couple of different municipalities. Kalamazoo Township is off to the corner as well on this image near Grand Prairie. And this also shows the cemetery development that had started. This is a unique site that started as a cemetery project. It's Mount Everest North is the cemetery that started. They had done clearing work and grading work and then stopped the project. And I don't know that business, but at some point that model didn't work anymore, and the land has sat a bit isolated since then until this project came forward. What we feel makes this project unique, and again, I'm just wearing the perspective of kind of a planning side of this, but the site is located in the city of Kalamazoo, but has other community partners in Ashimo as well. Also MDOT manages M43, who's a part of this project, West Main Street. Kalamazoo County Road Commission is a part of this as well. The site has access to US 131. It has room to potentially expand if the concept grows and works as is envisioned. But it's also relatively isolated from a lot of the neighbors as well, and it allows this project to happen without much impact on the rest of the community, but still being adjacent and very accessible to the community when finished. Next slide, please. Here's another aerial view of the site. The site we're talking about, the 20 acres, is highlighted in the orange-red color. This is from the submittal with the packet that was seen. This shows it's kind of a peninsula of land at the westernmost edge of the city of Kalamazoo. And again, dates from that unique element of the cemetery project happening, which is why it was annexed into the city in the 1960s. Next slide, please. So I've touched on some of these unique characteristics of the site, but as this project design has evolved, we've tried to really wear the lens of the natural features protection zoning and the city's zoning, as well as our neighbors in the township as parts of the project. We'll go through there as well. But trying to think through what makes this site different, what makes this site unique. And I've mentioned the isolation, I've mentioned the annexation for the cemetery project. The fact that the site has been partially cleared in the past. There's been adjacent projects that have happened with high-capacity gas and electric lines that are immediately adjacent to the west of this site. And then US 131, when it was built in the 1960s, we don't know what type of grading took place there, but likely this site may have been a landing spot for some of those soils when that project happened in the 1960s as well. And then one other element that's a bit unique is because of the relative isolation, there's not a shared parking opportunity. So it requires parking needs to be met on site versus having overflow into a neighboring parcel. Also, the Road Commission is the road agency that's going to manage Maple Hill Drive, which is the access road onto this property. And future access roads would also be county roads, most likely. And they have a unique element that doesn't allow on-street parking on Road Commission roads unless it's inside of a downtown development authority district, which this is not. So there is no street parking allowed. If that was the case, some of that asphalt that's used for the street could be the overflow parking, which would thus reduce the parking lot size. So Site's unique in that way. In City of Kalamazoo, that parking need on street would be met, and some of that overflow need would be accommodated on the asphalt that's already there for the street. But on this site, that can't occur. Next slide, please. Unique characteristics of the project. So Jane touched on this already, but project is a regional sports hub, requires access to highways, also proximity to restaurants, hotels, and retail was a big part of that as well. If it were out in a field farther outside of the city, then it would require a lot of movements back and forth to hotels, retail, and restaurants. The goal is that this site has some of those on site and accessibility to reach those in downtown as well, and throughout the region through the highway system. But a lot of those needs are met in closer proximity because of the kind of unique elements of this project and site. It is permitted by zoning. I think Nolan mentioned that. It's permitted, but maybe not anticipated as a potential regional sports facility on this type of site. So it's created this scenario where it's permitted use, but because of the way it's functioning and designed and is ideally focused on a successful project to serve the region, there's some elements of it that maybe don't quite fit in a typical classification of a project like this in the City of Kalamazoo. City of Kalamazoo is also a more urban-oriented zoning district because most of the city is an urban composition. A lot of it is. In this particular case, we are on the fringe of the city, and it's a bit of a different site compared to the rest of the city areas. And I think most of these have been touched on already. One element of the project, just to mention though, is project use will be clean and accessible to the community. So in other words, it's intended to be environmentally friendly, sensitive as much as possible as a project and use as well. There's also one last thing, I guess. There is a perimeter drive required because of the building use for safety. So some of that additional clearing is taking place to accommodate a perimeter road or a ring road around the building itself for fire safety. Next slide, please. So we've made a number of adjustments in response to reviewing all of the NFP woodland standards. So it's been mentioned by Nolan, but there's a section of trees in the northeast section of the parcel that we have made a diligent effort to preserve. We are acknowledging that there's a potential for Maple Hill Drive to be extended if the township desires to do that in the future alongside the road commission and the city to accommodate future development. So we've noted that on the drawing. We're not requesting that extension, but we're acknowledging that there's a desire to potentially do that in the future. But otherwise, our goal is to preserve those trees. The thought is as you drive into the facility, you're going to have this natural view of trees as you turn the corner coming into the complex. We've also shrunk the parking lot. So the parking lot, we've gone through, I think, 3 or 4 site visits have taken place in the last 2 weeks, actually, to visit additional similar community or complexes to understand how their parking needs fit within the profile of those different sites. As a result, parking has shrunk, and that helps to preserve some additional trees as well. We've also stacked some of the non-sport court uses, so the front of house components, the offices, the restrooms. We put a mezzanine on top of that so as not to stretch out that footprint any more than necessary, but take those components that aren't sport related and to stack those on top of each other, and so then reducing that footprint to provide some more tree preservation as well. And then there's a non-motorized trail to help minimize potentially some of the vehicle needs and parking lot size as well. Next slide, please. This is a sketch of the site. This is in your packet, I believe, as well. You can see the trees that we're desiring to preserve in the northeast section of the parcel. You can see or kind of feel that entry drive as you pull in to have all those trees there and protecting those as well. We also have a section preserved in the southwest corner on this sketch, and then some additional greenery in the parking lot has been incorporated as well. There's the ring road that I mentioned as well, the perimeter road, and the storm pond that Nolan mentioned in his report. Next slide, please. So slopes is the other NFP consideration that we have been really focused on as a group. We've looked at 4 or 5 different site layouts to try to reduce the impact on the slopes. We believe, we don't know the origin of the steeper slopes that are on the site. We think some of them may be from these projects in the mid-20th century, the US 131 construction, the cemetery construction, Consumers Energy. There's a gas line under those big power lines that are there, so there was likely a lot of digging that took place as those were trenched in. Site does not include water or wetlands, as Nolan mentioned, and then it's also isolated from the residential neighbors. So in terms of what makes this site a bit unique from others in the city, here's some of those elements here. Next slide, please. The project itself, I won't repeat all of these. You've heard these. The project is regional in nature, requires a relatively large floor area, requires parking on site because we can't overflow into the street or onto shared parking. So as a result, we've really tried to shape it to respect as many of the existing grades as possible, but there are some sections in the middle of the site, in particular the parking and building footprints, that we don't feel we can avoid at this point. And then we also are accommodating on-site the stormwater capacity for the project. Next slide, please. And I think I've mentioned some of these. Also, we've similar to Woodlands, we've really tried to shrink the footprint of the different uses of the site to protect slopes and woodlands as much as possible, and these are noted here on the slide. Next slide, please. Here's another map. This shows the location of those steeper slopes. One section on the west end or the left end of this drawing is under the building footprint, and then the larger section on the east end or right side of the drawing is related to the parking lot in that area. Next slide, please. One more image of the approach at the facility as you come in. The goal is to have some sections of glass to provide some natural light coming into the building as well. Hopefully some views of some of those preserved trees would come in through those glass areas as well. I think there's one more slide, Nolan. And then one more interior view, just to give a sense. I mentioned the mezzanine. You can see that kind of stacked condition on the back side of this image in this conceptual interior rendering to see that second story component, what that might look like. I think that's all I have, and just want to say again, thank you for the opportunity to be here. Thanks.
Kurt or Lori, before you sit down and before we open it up to board comments, I was wondering if you could speak to the inclusion of the impervious extension of Maple Hill Drive, what that percentage would potentially, how that would impact that 13.5%. If it were included,
Sure.
like what would that difference be?
Sure, yeah, I can start that. Again, Lori is the expert. Lori is here from Hurley and Stewart, but the calculation is roughly 2.5% that the impact would be if the township and the road commission and the city made that decision to put that road extension in. Looks like it's about 2.5% in addition to the clearing that we have proposed in the current project layout that we've submitted for.
Okay.
Can I ask a clarifying question? So
Sure.
you're saying if the road went through, there would be an additional 2.5% of the
overall
parcel
site.
of the parcel would be removed.
I'll ask Lori Davis to maybe come forward as
I think
support
that's what
too.
I'm hearing, but I just want to make sure.
Yeah, considering that that road hasn't been designed and we don't know the grading, I
Sure.
offset by 20 foot on either side and recalculated it. So that's about 2.5%. So that would come out of the 10.5% that we would have remaining. So that would leave us at 8%.
But yeah, I think right now it's 13,
Yeah, we were-
13.5%
Correct, yeah.
would be preserved. So if that road did exist, it would
11.
drop that 13.5 down to 11, basically.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Thanks.
So,
Does that help to answer the question? Okay, yeah.
All right, so Fire Lieutenant Tim Loso, been with the department coming up on 25 years.
What made you interested in getting into public safety?
Well, I started down in Florida. I've always wanted to serve, right? I grew up in a church where we did service as a Boy Scout, made Eagle Scout, so it's always been part of who I am. So I started with the sheriff's office down there, thinking I'd spend my whole career in Florida. Met my wife, she's from up here, so moved up here in 2001 and been here ever since. So in the public safety model, up until 2018, our fire engines ran as single or two-person apparatus, right? Your engine operator, their job was to maintain the apparatus and then get that to the scene. And then our PSOs would get there, they'd change out their blues, put on their fire gear, and they'd be the company for that engine. In 2018, when we established the squad responds to all major incidents in the city. The squad responds to all technical rescues, obviously hazmat, but vehicle extrications. Anytime someone is entrapped in a car, the squad rolls. And just, we've been through some extra classes some others haven't. We have a couple of extra pieces of equipment that may make the rescue more effective or safe, so we can help supplement that when we go. So that's how the squad is used in the city of Kalamazoo. And then outside for mutual aid, same thing, is that they know the squad comes with extra tools. We have a lot of our tech rescue gear on the squad. We have the extra training, the manpower, so we're a benefit for other departments when they call us. If we show up on scene, we can bring the extra tools or personnel or training experience that maybe they won't get with another rig, because that's a single person rig and I'm pulling patrol officers off the street that now are coming to get the job done.
You like all those lines? Thank you.
So my crew, we've been together for probably 2 years now. We've chosen to work together.
All right, sounds like no call and comment so far. So I'd like to open it up for questions and discussion from the board.
Yeah, kind of echoing, I'll try to work through how to ask this question more accurately or specifically, but kind of echoing what the public comments were. I had a lot of thoughts about, hey, I want to understand better. You did explain some of it in the presentation, like things that were considered in order to avoid the reduction in woodland to the extent that it is being proposed right now. Yeah, but I just want to hear more about that, basically, because yeah, that preserving that percentage of woodland this is a very somewhat rare occurrence in an urban area to have this big block of woodland, and it serves the people of the community through, ecosystem services is the term that gets used. Won't go into those details, but so what we're having to do here is balance the impact to the community from that environmental perspective versus the social perspective, and so kind of weighing those two things. And yeah, just as we go through these questions, I maybe come up with better ways to ask this question. But yeah, can somebody please address what the public comments were? Maybe we can start there. The sort of parking analysis seems like a really salient thing to start with, perhaps. Hi.
Can you hear me? There we go. Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Brian Persky. I'm the Director of Business Development at Discover Kalamazoo. So I just wanted to address the first question on the number of parking spaces really quick, and I might defer to others if they have something I missed. But so I also serve on this, we call it KCCAD. That's the acronym for the Kalamazoo County Event Center Assessment District. I also serve on that board. We have a design build committee that just started several weeks ago, and we've had a lot of discussion on the parking. One of the things that came up when we first did the feasibility study that was referenced early on from 2 or 3 years ago, what came out of that study was that their suggestion was 950 parking spaces, and the biggest reason for that was on tournament weekends when you have hundreds of volleyball and basketball teams in there. A majority, like our job is going to be to fill that place on the weekends. So in our eyes, if you ask us how often that's going to happen, our hope is that it's, you know, upwards of 40 weeks out of the year that we have tournaments there. So we don't want to be short on parking. And we had a lot of discussion on, is 950 the right number? And we did some field visits last week actually and visited several facilities. And during those conversations, Kurt, correct me on the number if I'm wrong, but I think we have reduced that number to 650, somewhere in that range, because we did feel like 950 was a little high. And we wanted to take some of this into account when we got through some of this process, that we weren't overbuilding parking and that we were doing that with respect to the site in general. So I think, you know, we had a lot of conversations over the course of several meetings to do the appropriate number of parking spaces. So, and then you want to add something? Go ahead.
I just want to add, you know, how do they get to the number? How did the original company get to the 950? They look at the use of the facility. So I showed you the diagram with the 16 volleyball courts, right? So if it's 16 courts, then that's 32 teams. And they know how many players 32 teams equates to. And they know from their experience how many spectators per player. So they calculate, I think, 2.2 spectators per player, then a certain number of players on the teams, plus, you know, coaches, to get to, then they calculate, they figure out, they assume how many cars that then equates to. And what is unique, like, for example, about volleyball, they tend to play in 2 waves. So there's a morning wave and an afternoon wave. And the after, so they think about that. So it's not, you know, they're staggered in a sense. So you don't necessarily need the space for all the day. You only need the space for half the day, if that makes sense. The basketball needs are slightly less because you have 8 courts and 6. You know, so 16 teams instead of 32 teams. You know, Brian said we're looking at, you know, he said 40. We'd love to fill it 52 weeks a year, you know, if we can. But I think 40 is a good number. When we look at what comparable facilities are doing, they are busy almost every weekend of the year. And if it's not a basketball, volleyball season, there are other, like I mentioned, mat sports, gymnastics, cheer. There's other sports that this facility can accommodate that would also come in. So that's how they got to the 950 number. You know, on our tours, I will say, you know, it made us nervous to go down to 650, but we recognize that we need to balance environmental stewardship, you know, with the facility, and that is the call that we've decided to make, is to reduce from the recommended 950 down to the 650.
And to clarify, I think it was mentioned that on-street parking would not be allowed due to Kalamazoo County Road Commission rules. Is that right?
Yes, yeah, that's what I was going to mention too. Yeah, if that overflow onto the street was a viable option, as you see in some of these event-type facilities, it would be utilized, but it's not permitted. And we have had discussions with the Road Commission. Road Commission has been at project planning meetings, and unfortunately, it's just not an option the way they have their rules and regulations set up right now. So I was going to try to address just, there was a comment about structured parking as well. Structured parking is certainly a different component to have in a suburban setting like this. I know economics are not a factor necessarily in this decision-making process for your board, but structured parking from an economic standpoint wouldn't be feasible. The cost is roughly 10 times the number for cost per parking space to construct that. So you see that only in rare occasions, typically in a more urban setting. And unfortunately, we just don't have I'll say we, but the project doesn't really have a mechanism to be able to fund that structured parking component, in addition to all the other comparable facilities typically do surface parking to be able to do a quick kind of in and out type setup between tournaments and events. That's my understanding of it, at least.
And I'll add too, you know, I'm not for certain, but with there might be some height restrictions as well based on the base zoning of RS5. So a parking structure would inevitably be taller. I think Kurt or the team can speak to maybe the other variances that they're pursuing as it relates to the project, that might give some more context.
Sure, yeah, thanks, Nolan. So there is a height limitation of 35 feet with the underlying zoning. The project, the sport section of the project, because of the interior height that is needed for, in particular, the volleyball tournaments, and the fact that the western section of the site sits a bit lower, in 20 to 30 feet lower, actually, than the eastern section of the site. That western section of the building will be a bit taller, and there will be a request for a height variance for the building, but a structured parking deck would be quickly hit that limit again and would require another likely variance request to make that feasible. And we feel the building itself may be justified. It'll be up to the board to make that decision, but because of the specific use type in the building and the fact that the western section of the site is actually a lower section of the site. Thank you.
Yeah, that's relevant to something I was thinking as I was staring at it. I'm sure you've worked through all kinds of different arrangements of everything on the site, tons probably. I haven't done that myself, but I'm looking at it, doing it in my mind right now, and just wondering, for example, and you may have already answered it just there, is there an arrangement where all the built-up areas are shifted to the west towards the highway and the retention basin is moved in the middle of the parking lot, for example? And one, has that been considered, and is that perhaps not an option because of the topography on site is more suitable for what you proposed here? Or
yeah,
else?
Lori can touch on that for sure. I think, yeah, the kind of the fundamental component that we're trying to solve for is the building footprint, which we've tried to really shrink by stacking some components of it, and the parking itself, which we're also trying to shrink, and we've gone below what the experts are recommending to make that happen, and then the storm pond itself. So Lori will speak to the storm pond and maybe topography of the site, but those three things are what we're trying to solve for from a land, as you're talking about kind of the puzzle of the site, how do you make it fit?
Totally.
And then the topography, Lori's got details on that.
Yeah, so this site is kind of difficult as far as trying to put a large flat building and a large flat parking lot on. We're helping matters by doing the stacked situation. The property itself goes from a high point and a low point that are 41 feet different from each other. So it's a huge grade change across the site. The low points of the site are to the northwest, which is where we're showing that, and then just kind of along that north property line, more towards the west, are the low points on the site. So to shift the low point kind of to the middle of the site is going to raise the cost of the project due to the extra movement of dirt and soils. But yeah, that with the shelved mezzanine concept of the building, we're able to put that storm in that northwest site portion and kind of save a little bit more of the footprint on the site as overall.
Makes a ton of sense. Thanks.
Yeah, I think we're trying to minimize soil movements, import, export off the site as much as we can, and that natural low point is that northwest corner, so that's why that storm pond ended up there.
So it was mentioned that there's the pedestrian or biking path, and I also see some bike parking on here, and that may offset the need for parking capacity. I'm assuming that that's not actually factored into the parking needs because of predictability with that. Is that a correct assumption?
So we have added a non-motorized component. The site is a bit isolated, as we've talked about several times in this discussion today, but it's likely that most of the visitors will arrive by car. That's like we are providing the non-motorized component and the bike parking. We have 20 parking spaces there for bikes. There's a possibility Kalamazoo Central is relatively close. You could see some movement from the K Central area for sporting events or one of the adjacent neighborhoods to the west, the Westwood area. But a lot of the regional traffic will be arriving by car.
Okay, and so I see that the path goes kind of off the plot here. Where does that extend to? Does that follow the full extent of the access drive? Does it go to the nearby community? What's the extent there?
A good question. The intent is that that path is going to be a connection on Maple Hill Drive. So Maple Hill Drive connects down to West Main. Maple Hill Drive also connects to Croydon. Croydon runs out to the east from Maple Hill to Drake Road. And so Croydon has a sidewalk on it. There is a plan to add an additional sidewalk, my understanding, on the east side of Maple Hill Drive, south of this property. So the section that this project doesn't cover would be filled in by another project that is underway now, a senior housing project on the east side of Maple Hill Drive, on the far southern section of Maple Hill Drive. The other sections of Maple Hill Drive, the south end to West Main, does have a sidewalk on it as well.
And on top of that, are you able to, one of the main themes that I'm hearing through this is accessibility and making this accessible to the local community. Mm-hmm. Can you speak to how accessible this facility would be to the nearest line of public transit?
Yeah, good question. So Metro has service on West Main, and Metro has been in a couple of discussions, meetings already with this project team. They have routes that run north on Drake Road from West Main up to Kalamazoo Central. There's a possibility that as this project takes place, some additional service could come in to the Croydon and Maple Hill Drive area. The line haul service, the primary line haul service, is on West Main, and there's a hub at Maple Hill Mall already at the west end, or at the east end of Maple Hill Mall. And we will have, the project will have service at the opening from MetroLink. So MetroLink is the new program that is stretching the boundaries of Metro's line haul service. So at the perimeter or the edges of that line haul service, Link is a on-demand service that will connect you from a bus line to a destination within the urban zone, or from that destination to the bus line. So the bus line will be available within approximately half a mile, and then that last half mile could be met by MetroLink, and potentially more in the future, but Link right out of the gate as the project opens. So those discussions have been happening. Metro Connect is another countywide service that's door to door that will certainly have service here just like it does across the county.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Something to bring forward, or the applicant can speak to. The also submitted in your packets was the woodland evaluation that was conducted by Hurley and Stewart. I was hoping the applicant could speak to that report and kind of walk through some of the key findings from that.
Sure. I was out there probably end of October to walk the site. As Kurt mentioned before, the site was cleared sometime probably in the 60s. So the majority of the site all kind of started at ground zero during that time. The majority of the trees that have come up are sugar maples, and then there's assorted other trees. The larger, most of the sugar maples are about 18 inches or 24 inches and smaller as they've come up. Faster growing trees such as cottonwood and liriodendron are obviously a much larger tree. Along the northern property line, there are some larger trees. Many of them are kind of in decline at this point, but there are some nice black cherries. There's some walnut trees, and it's quite possible that once we grade things out, we'll be able to individually save those trees because they're right on the property line, and we'll need to make grade anyhow by that point. So especially in the northeast corner where we're showing the area to be preserved is where some of those nice maple and black walnuts are.
Yeah, and on the civil sheets that you have in your packet as well, there's specifically call outs for any areas of woodland that would be preserved to ensure proper call outs for tree protection fencing around those areas, what we try to do now is tie that to soil erosion or soil control plans to make sure that a lot of that is up before any work would actually start. So, yeah.
So to clarify, Nolan, so if this moved forward and it got passed by the Zoning Board of Appeals, this would still find its way back in front of us at some point in the process with more of like details on landscape design and all that?
Correct. So, yep, it's, yeah, it's a bit of a chicken or egg situation sometimes, but when the variance process, you know, we basically don't start site plan if there's situations where an applicant wants to pursue a variance request still, so we'll go through this step, right? And again, to clarify, you know, you as the board make your decisions, right? And in this case, it's either to recommend these variances would go, you know, either the affirmative or not to Zoning Board of Appeals. Then Zoning Board of Appeals is the ultimate authority there. Once that they work through that step, they have other variances as well that they'd be bringing forward. So they're looking to go to Zoning Board of Appeals in January. Then they would start, after that process is through, they would start our site plan development process. And I believe even before all that processes start, they've been meeting with staff to try and understand, to do more of that coordination because of the complexities here, which isn't, you know, it's not something that happens all the time, but with projects of this scale, that's what happens. So, so that is kind of the procedure. Yep. And yeah, another clarification, I said it earlier, but my staff recommendation in my report is only a staff recommendation, right? So it is ultimately, you know, the board's decision. So I'm just stating that clearly.
I guess a question I have is why this site? What other sites were considered? Are there other 20-acre parcels in the city that are not solid woodland forest canopy cover that could be utilized?
Yeah. We looked at sites across the county. So overall, we considered more than 30 sites. We understood from the consultant what makes a good site, you know, to be successful for something like this. And we looked at, as I say, across the county, we're narrowed down to 8 sites. Only one other one of those was in the city of Kalamazoo, and that site was rejected because of its proximity to neighborhoods. So many times, you know, the traffic, something can come with this, that being in or near a neighborhood is not desirable.
Similarly, yeah, I don't know if you can answer it or not. Westgate appears to own the property to the parcel to the south as well. Is that correct? And that is not forested. I wonder whether that was considered.
Yeah, good question. So this gets into that complicated element of the municipal boundaries. So that section is actually in Ashmore Township. So there is a separate commercial zoning on that land to the south. There is a partnership that, and that partnership is not AVB, it's Westgate 131 LLC. So that Westgate 131 LLC entity has agreed to support this project in the city of Kalamazoo, which was a desire of the project to make it happen. And again, the question about 20 acres within the city, I would say Discover Kalamazoo and the team did a great job of trying to uncover every potential opportunity that met the objectives of this overall project. And 20 acres in the city is difficult to find. We have a lot of great preserved sections of the city with Asylum Lake and Kleinstuck. Those are larger parcels, but obviously those are well respected and protected for good reason in the city. So this is one of those spots that is on the very edge of the city, accessible to the highways and in the city itself. So I think that it was a very extensive exercise that Discover Kalamazoo and the team went through on that process.
Yeah, and it being, I can see, one of the main reasons I heard you say was this, developing it in the city of Kalamazoo was a, maybe even a requirement of the investment, but I want to, I can see the social, you explained well, the social value to youth and just having an opportunity for those activities and a place for youth and non-youth probably to go. That part is very compelling. The economic impact of this, talked about a little bit. How will this, in a broader sense, economically impact the city of Kalamazoo? Not just the city, but the actual residents. So is there, just talk to that a little more. I see how the businesses that are going to benefit, they'll benefit, but that's not the people of Kalamazoo. So I want to understand that perspective too.
I just want to clarify one thing about the site selection. When we narrowed down to 3 final sites, one was in the city of Portage, one was in Texas Township, and then this one in the city of Kalamazoo. So I just want to be clear that we did consider sites outside the city of Kalamazoo. This was unanimous. I think it was unanimous. We had, the county appointed a site selection committee to make the final choice, and this was the final choice. Regarding economic impact, there'll be economic impact coming from several factors. One is that $48 million, that is primarily coming, much of that is direct spending by visitors who don't live in Kalamazoo County in Kalamazoo County. And so they come in here and they spend money. A lot of that will be hotels. A lot of it will be restaurants. Much of that will be other, attractions, museums, attractions, that kind of thing. If we look at, I have access to what we call geolocation data. We can see when people come one place, where they go. We're fortunate enough, we already host a lot of youth sports events in ice hockey, figure skating, wrestling, soccer. You might be familiar with the tennis tournament that takes place at USTA Boys Nationals. We see that when people come in for those events, those are also the days that we get peak spikes at places like Airway Fun Center or Revel and Roll or maybe some restaurants. Therefore, what that then means is it creates job opportunities. So many of those restaurants wouldn't staff the way they did if they didn't have the impact of the out-of-towners. We wouldn't have the hotels that we have if we didn't have those out-of-towners coming in. The state of Michigan, the MEDC, they publish visitor spending data and impacts on a county-by-county basis within Michigan. And 7% of jobs in Kalamazoo County are supported by visitor spending. So you don't think of Kalamazoo County as being like Orlando or Hawaii as this big kind of tourism place, but actually 7% of jobs in Kalamazoo County would not exist if we didn't bring visitors in. And these sports tournaments right now and other sports are a key way. And I think another way that residents benefit is, you all are thinking there, I'm talking about Airway Fun Center or Revel and Roll, or, what is your favorite restaurant? Maybe it's Waldo's, maybe it's Bell's, maybe it's, I don't know what your favorite restaurants are. It's quite likely some of your favorite places wouldn't exist if they didn't have that 20% of foot traffic that's coming in from out-of-towners, because if their revenue declined by 20%, then that restaurant probably couldn't be there as an amenity for residents to enjoy. So the reason that Kalamazoo County has Discover Kalamazoo is because by bringing in that visitor spending, we're able to sustain the restaurants, the museums, the attractions, the performing arts. You think of the shows that are at Miller that residents can go to. If Miller didn't sell tickets to out-of-towners, then those performing arts also wouldn't be there for residents. So that's the benefit of the visitor economy.
Great, thank you. Appreciate that.
Jane, can I add one thing? So I think in midweek, what type of accesses are there for residents midweek? And I'm a City of Kalamazoo resident, so I think about this too, of just what opportunities are there for people that are here Monday through Thursday when there's not tournaments happening. Are there opportunities for those local residents too?
Yes, 100%. So that rarely do these type of tournaments happen on weekdays. The exception would be maybe during a school holiday, like over Christmas or something like that. But it is Monday through Thursday, maybe even midday Friday, depending what the setup they need to do for an upcoming tournament. it's available, for local use. That's the business model here, and that'll be very important for the operator to maximize local opportunities, because they'll need to be keeping the place as busy as possible.
Just one thing I wanted to clarify too. I think there was a resident comment too related to the origin of slopes on a site. That is correct, that the NFP ordinance doesn't call out a man-made or a natural or a naturalized slope. Slope is a slope is a slope. So I just wanted to clarify that before I forget. So.
Yeah, I totally understand like the local needs and desires for a recreational facility, and the economic impact and that type of stuff, and I all for that stuff, but kind of have to be here to advocate for the NFP side of things too. And the slope one is kind of more palatable to me, kind of just giving proximity to like water resources and that type of stuff. The woodland is the one where I kind of get like stuck kind of trying to play around with, figure out what possible alternatives there may be to kind of reduce removal of more woodland. I do like how you kind of reduce the parking spaces in number and try to stack things like the mezzanine, and there's certain things you just can't work around, like the fire code and stuff like that. I also like how you kind of try to preserve kind of more of the higher quality portion of the woods in the northeast corner. I think, from the NFP side of things, obviously it is still a significant variance. So kind of, I would like to see kind of maybe not so much required as far as NFP goes stuff currently, but like kind of additional, thoughtful design things integrated into the project. Right now we're pretty limited, and one of the things that NFP requires down the road is the wording is kind of a little bit weird, but like at least not invasive stuff planted, landscaping with a preference of native stuff. Just looking at kind of the what appears on this figure to be like mowed green grass, green space, I think there's a lot of opportunity for the integration of native landscaping kind of to help mitigate some of that loss with the forested area. And another thing I thought of, like I totally understand like the cool design with like the glass and like the natural light and so on. There's also concerns too about like excuse me, bird mortality in urban areas of birds running into glass and stuff. And I know there are mitigations out there. I don't know, like off the top of my head, like I'm not an expert on that portion, I'll admit, but there are things to kind of consider and integrate as far as making it more palatable, I guess, to kind of like moving forward with a recommendation on the variance, kind of that, we don't have now, but
you could, it's up to you, but you could look at conditions for, the recommendation to the Zoning Board of Appeals for approval. That's something you can discuss. So just pointing that out so as you continue to discuss.
Yeah, that's kind of some stuff running through my head right now, and I'm curious if any of the other board members kind of have other comments or stuff related to that or not.
Yeah, I can echo that and agree that definitely having a really thoughtful design that incorporates a lot of native plantings, a lot less turf, as little turf as possible, in my opinion. I think it's also good to know that, or good to understand that with a project like this, if this were to go forward and this large woodland area to be clear cut for the project, that it'd be increasing edge habitat by thousands and thousands of feet, new edge habitat, which isn't always a good thing. That interior forest that was surrounded by forest is now gone, so the impacts that it will see from sun, rain, wind, storms, all of that could be greatly detrimental. You'll see a lot, potentially tree mortality, tree failure, because those plants and trees aren't used to that weather conditions. A new thousands more feet of entry points for invasive species to come into, where in heavily covered forestry woodland areas, they can kind of combat invasives a little bit better with heavy shade and competition. So thinking about all that, as well as just the large amount of fragmentation that's going to be happening on not just this plot, but its connection to surrounding plots, we are potentially fragmenting this forest, which is detrimental to plants, animals, every ecosystem function you can list off will be negatively impacted. So, and again, echoing what another board member said just about how rare this woodland cover is for Kalamazoo, and how important it is to the residents, city, state, it expands to everybody. So a lot of things to consider.
Yeah, I'm kind of coming back on my point. Like, I know it's the American Bird Conservancy that puts out kind of guidelines as far as how to reduce kind of bird collisions with glass and stuff. And I know that is something locally people care about. Like, the local Audubon Society is very active in kind of that work and monitoring that stuff. And so I know that's something kind of locally people care about for sure, as it kind of relates to natural features.
Yeah, so sorry, I don't mean to interject, but I think that a lot of the suggestions from a site plan standpoint are still, a lot of those are being taken into consideration now. And so I know the native planting concept, I won't say for sure, but I know a lot of those islands would show as green now are intended to be. That's not necessarily turf grass. I think that's open to consideration from the board and from others at the city on what makes sense there from a use standpoint and from a natural feature standpoint as well, what can be incorporated in at the landscaping level. And I think, again, I don't want to speak for the project itself, but I know that those discussions are underway right now. And then the bird-safe glass, I believe, Jane, correct me if I'm wrong, but we have had somebody with expertise in that area on the focus group, so that will be taken into consideration as well. I know I visited some buildings recently. I think the new county courthouse actually has the dots on the glass that are intended to be bird friendly.
Yep, and it was mentioned before too, but for like landscaping, right? The board has the ability, I think Director Martin was trying to get at it, but the NFP ordinance says, under certain circumstances when all natives for landscaping aren't available, there's non-native, non-invasive options that the board can consider approving. You have that ability, but again, if that's a condition you want to explore, that's one thing. The other thing to note, again, is that you would see the project again if it were to move forward through site plan review. It would need NFP board approval to move forward for full site plan approval. And a big component of that would be the landscaping, any new plantings, things like that. So.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying there, Nolan. That was what I was trying to get at. Yeah, it's good to know that kind of maybe some of those things that haven't as much been required by NFP, but those additional things are kind of being considered and kind of thought about in the process of developing this. Is there any more discussion or questions from board members here?
Final thing I'll note here too is that you can do separate motions for each of the cases, for each of the variances that you're looking at. It doesn't have to be wrapped up in one motion. You can have it be two separate motions.
I'll ask the board members if there's any input and what kind of motion that we may like to see tonight.
I'll speak for myself. I'm still a little undecided and not quite ready to put a motion on the table. However, I'm not sure based on what condition. I'm considering a motion to table the issue, but if I were to do so, I would want to be respectful for your time and attach like an actual request to that. And that's what's going on in my head right now.
If you feel as though you do not have sufficient information to take action, we'd want to understand what the further information you'd require to table it future, basically the next NFP meeting.
Right.
So that would be something you'd want to deliberate and understand as a board.
So if we were to do a conditional recommendation, would we consider tacking on a percentage of this green space, which it sounds like they would be cooperative with, for having native or the non-native, non-invasive? This is maybe a question for Lori. I mean, if you just had to estimate ballpark range, what percentage do you think of this green space you might be able to accommodate native plants or the non-native, non-invasive? So we can just consider this in terms of actionable items. We can try and quantify this rough compensation to give us some assurance in a recommendation to move forward. Because it seems like you guys have exhausted a lot of avenues in trying to rework and rethink this, and you're kind of backed into a corner with various regulations and ordinances from various entities. That was a long-winded question, but yeah. Thank you.
Well, a lot of the areas that we're needing to remove trees is based on grading. So we'll have a slope going down to the existing grade. I think it would be reasonable to request that those areas be restored in native trees. So in the future, that would become overgrowth of tree stand. So I think that would be a reasonable request by the board to request a restoration of trees similar to what we'd be removing. Obviously not the size we're removing.
Would you be able to estimate the percentage of the current green area that you might be able to do that for? I know it's a tough request off the top of the dome, but maybe a ballpark.
I think we could probably get 5% back.
Can I just clarify too, is the question related to this light green area? What percentage could be
restored,
native?
Correct.
I mean, I would think a lot of this is not necessarily intended to be, it's not turf grass necessarily functional or in use by the community that's going to be using this facility. That's primarily an indoor component. So I would think a lot of the islands and such, even if are there native grasses or anything else along those lines that would be preferable to have in there, I would think we could get a lot of that light green of what's showed in light green. A larger percentage of that could be native.
Yeah, that would definitely be native. I was regarding specifically to the loss of the trees and the fact that stuff could be restored along the fringes where we're grading down. But yeah, I think we would anticipate our plantings to be native plantings.
Yeah. So potentially restore 5% around those fringes, and then ballpark on is the intent for it to not be turf on most all of the light green inter-pavement areas?
Yeah, that's my understanding as we go through design. I think it's still open for discussion as we enter site plan review, but I don't necessarily see, and I don't want to speak for everybody, but I see everybody nodding their heads that having a native component of plantings on a large percentage of that site that's shown in light green now would be feasible.
Would it be fair to say 10% then of the total parcel for that green space to be native?
Sure seems like that's
Yeah,
practical from my standpoint, yeah. If not, I mean, I expect we would exceed that.
In lieu of a percentage to, when they come back for site plan review, we will have an opportunity to comment on, like,
yes,
hey, that's not enough, right? You know, please do more, or that is.
And we'll certainly have a detailed plan. Lori has a lot of expertise in the landscape
Tower Pinkster will actually be.
field. And Tower Pinkster is our design architect as well. So we'll have a much more detailed plan related to that as we come to site plan review as well. But certainly open to ideas and in support of some of the ideas that have been discussed today.
Yeah, those are good questions. And yeah, that's something I'm kind of thinking about as far as kind of the percentage loss with the woodland cover, but how much, not necessarily woodland, but just kind of native habitat space can be kind of integrated back into the design and kind of cumulatively what the percentage that might equal. And yeah.
If I may, I think, a resounding yes in terms of an interest from our standpoint. When we went on our site visits, several of these places we went to, they're either in industrial sites or whatever. Like we're glad that this isn't a place that will have, and you heard it from Dante, you heard it from the letter you have, like this could really be something that sets this place apart and makes it a more pleasant, place for people to come. And that idea of having the islands and other places be planted with more native grass and other, to the degree it's practical. I'm not a landscape architect or a designer, but I think I can speak for the project team when I say, yes, that is absolutely something that we wouldn't just entertain under duress, but that we are interested in and we think would make the project stronger.
Has there been any consideration, or is there any possibility of offsetting this this project with the acquisition of another piece of land that gets wrapped into, a land trust or preservation site, just to, offset what's going to be damaged here? I'm not sure if that's possible with funding sources, if it's, if that's not allowed with the allocation or not.
No, that had not come up. That has not come up in conversation. That idea, we couldn't use the hotel assessment revenue for that because the primary benefit of that revenue has to be to something that down the road will benefit the hotels. I think that would probably be the primary roadblock to that. In the ordinance that created the assessment, there's very specific uses for the assessment.
On a semi-related note, is there a plan for maybe it's a separate parcel, the square one to the east? East, yeah.
Yeah, I can maybe speak to that. So we have had discussions with that land ownership group that owns the land to the east. They do not have any firm plans right now of what would be intended. I think what I've seen from a conceptual planning standpoint is more of the multifamily residential type nature. So likely that particular type of use may fit better into some of the topography of that site and the trees of the site, although that's just conceptual at this point. But it's a separate, it's it's separate from this project, but we do have communication with that partnership group that owns that. And I think that there's a low spot that kind of drops into the middle of that square type parcel that you're referencing. I think it's roughly 40-acre parcel, maybe a little bit more. And that low spot would be respected. And I think there was some concepts that I've seen have shown residential multifamily kind of wrapping around that area, but again, protecting a lot of the trees and the existing grades on that site.
Yeah, and I asked just so it's clear because the main value of having a woodland part of the ordinance is keeping chunks, large contiguous chunks of woodland. That's the value of it. It's not just the trees. It's like having that. So I'm not, no parcel is independent, right? So we consider it as, you know, and we do appreciate that this design, and maybe that's just kind of how it worked out with topography too. But I think you did consider it how where you have preserved woodland, it is adjacent to existing woodland, and because that's, I mean, I guess that is in the ordinance as well, but.
That was the goal, was that northeast section could be kind of a continuation of that woodland that's there. And then, yeah, the goal is, from what I understand, again, it's a separate site, separate future project, but that their goal is that it would be, more of the woodlands would be on site there if it becomes more residential. So keeping those intact.
Yeah.
So that
come before us too, of course.
That larger flag-shaped parcel as it stands today is at 62 acres. So this 20-acre parcel shown on your screen right now doesn't necessarily exist today. It hasn't been split yet, but the one it splits off from would remain NFP. Lot combinations and splits, like if you were to take a couple properties that weren't NFP and combine them with adjacent properties that are, everything then becomes a part of the district. Similar with a split, they both remain NFP. So yeah, so that property to the right that it's going to split from, where that larger, like 152 acre kind of woodland complex that they've mapped out or delineated, you know, that is also, at least what's within the city of that woodland, is still NFP. It's still in the NFP district. So.
Yeah, I appreciate the enthusiasm for wanting to integrate kind of more of the native plants and stuff and kind of hearing us on that. I think, you know, that's something that, again, will ultimately come back before the boards. We'll kind of get nitty gritty and pick around on that in more detail in the future. So kind of with that, I don't know, I'm feeling better about things, basically, is what I'm kind of saying with that. But I just want to give another opportunity for more board discussion kind of before making a motion.
Just thinking out loud here, for me, I don't think that, I don't know if tabling it for later is going to, you know, I can't think of any additional information that I would want. I think I have what I need. Not to say the decision is going to be easy, but I think the information that I have is suitable for me.
Yeah, I agree with that, and it's good to kind of hear that sentiment from other board members. So with that, I think I will make a motion to recommend to the Zoning Board of Appeals to grant a variance from the protected slopes and slope setbacks NFP standards within the project limits, and to grant a variance from the woodland standard to preserve 13.5% of the existing woodland when 25% is the minimum to be preserved by right.
Did you want to make those two separate motions, or did you want to keep them combined?
I think I'm fine keeping them combined. I don't know if.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, I'll propose just how I said. But yeah, can I get a motion on that?
So moved.
All right.
And support.
All right, this one will need a roll call vote. Well, Nolan, will you please call the roll?
Prior to the roll call vote, I would like to amend conditions that we discussed. That will come back in the site plan review process, but I'd like to add the condition that, I'll put it this way, as much of the, call it green space, remaining green space as feasible as possible to be planted to native species and trees where possible.
Nolan, can you help me out on that? Is there anything need to be changed with verbiage and stuff?
You could just, Director Bassett, if you want to make that motion as it was originally stated and add the conditions on.
Okay. I shall say all that again. I'd like to make a motion to recommend to the Zoning Board of Appeals to grant a variance from the protected slopes and slope setbacks NFP standards within the project limits, and grant a variance from the woodland standard to preserve 13.5% of the existing woodland when 25% is the minimum to be preserved by right, on the condition that the developer includes native plantings in as many areas as possible that aren't developed, and including a preference for dense areas of trees.
All right, I'll support that motion. All right, yeah, Nolan, will you please call the roll?
Sure. Murgia?
Yes.
Martin?
Yes.
Stemple?
No.
Bassett?
Yes.
All right. Help me out of here again, Nolan. Is this where we just kind of continue to move on, or?
Guess that's correct, yep.
Okay. Well, with that, I do want to say thank you for everybody's time tonight and kind of bringing forth this stuff. And it's definitely difficult for us. We see a lot of the benefit and stuff, but yeah, there's still some kind of areas that are difficult, but we do really appreciate the time and effort tonight. All right, moving on to item 2, the 2026 NFP regular meeting schedule. Says there's an opportunity to provide public comments on this item. So if there's any public comments related to the meeting schedule for 2026, please step forward. Seeing no one step forward, is there any call-in comments? All right, no call-in comments. Nolan, do you want to provide some background on this?
Yeah, not too much background here. It's not too dissimilar to the meeting schedule from last year. I do have included, similar to last year, a December meeting date, although it's different than normal meeting dates. I believe the May 2026 date is different and the December date are different. May is because of conflicts with a holiday, and then similarly with December, it's just conflict with the holidays. So, yeah, we're trying to set up for 2026. I think the January meeting date is already set, so that is kind of the one that's posted right now, but the other ones that we just go through this regular approval process each year. So if there's any concerns about a date or discussion around a certain date, just open it up to the board if there's any questions. Usually, I think last year we had voted no December meeting. This time I have it on there. So Yeah, keep it open.
I personally, at this moment, see no conflicts on my end with the meeting schedule. Are there any other comments from board members on the meeting schedule?
No, everything looked good with me too, so I didn't see any issues with it.
All right, I'd like to make a motion to approve the 2026 NFP regular meeting schedule as presented.
So moved.
Support.
All right, this will need a roll call vote. Nolan, will you please call the roll?
Bassett?
Yes.
Martin?
Yes.
Stemple?
Yes.
Mergia?
Yes.
All right, motion passes. Moving on, item G, looks like there's no unfinished business. Staff reports and updates, so there's still no staff reports and updates.
No, I'm hoping to, I think for the January meeting, my hope is to have the draft NFP guide to talk about, so we can maybe finalize that Q1. I know I've received some separate comments from Director Stemple, so if you do have any of those comments, send them my way. And then I'll probably do another little annual report discussion with the board, just to do a 2025 kind of in review. It was a busy year. So we basically, I think we had consistent cases from start to finish with very little, you know, we didn't really miss any meetings. We held meetings for each month. So it's a very busy year for the board. Years past, we would, if we didn't have action items, we wouldn't have met. But this year we did a little bit more of some of those work sessions. They weren't always long, but I think they were still fruitful. So yeah, that's really all I've got kind of as a sneak preview for January.
All right, thank you. Are there any communications or announcements from any staff or board members? Hearing none, the meeting is adjourned.